In this video, I'm going to do a brief introduction to Article 3, which talks about the judicial branch. We'll be talking about it in more detail in the future. And so in past semesters, I've had students email me and ask me, was there something more in the lecture on the Constitution about the judicial branch? And the answer is no. So if you feel like you're missing something, you're not. This is all I'm going to talk about. Again, later on, we'll talk about it in more detail. After that, I'm going to make some personal comments, quite frankly, about sort of changes that I'm making in my lecture videos. I don't know if I've explained this already, but the last time I recorded the lecture videos was 8 years ago. It was in 2013. And now it's the end of 2021. Beginning of 2022, and so I'm updating them. And things have changed a little bit in that amount of time, and my thinking about how I want to teach this class has changed. And so after talking about the judicial branch for a very short time, then I'm going to make some personal comments. The personal comments are not going to be on the exam. They're just sharing with you my observations and how I'm thinking about the way that I teach certain topics. So after I'm done talking about the judicial branch, if you're not interested, that's totally fine. You can just, once we're done with that, skip over you just stop watching and you can go on to the next video. Okay? So I just wanted to give you a preview of what's coming up with that in mind. So Article 3. Article 3 deals with the judicial branch. And as I don't know if I mentioned it previously, the Constitution only creates one court. It creates the Supreme Court of the United States. That's it, nothing more. And so all the other courts below the Supreme Court are created by Congress. So before I get to that, the Supreme Court justices, the judges that sit on the Supreme Court, are nominated by the president. But the president doesn't just get to pick who he wants. The people who are nominated have to go before the United States Senate, not the House, the Senate, and they have to be confirmed. And so they'll hold hearings, and they'll ask judges questions, and then ultimately wind up voting to approve or not approve. The vast majority of times, whomever the president nominates is approved. Every once in a while, a nominee is either not approved or it becomes clear that they're not going to be approved and the president will withdraw the nomination. Once somebody is confirmed to sit on the Supreme Court, they have a lifetime appointment. They serve for as long as they want until they either die or retire. As I said, there is an entire federal court system that below the Supreme Court, but the Constitution gives Congress the authority to create all those other courts. So we're going to be talking about courts of appeals. We're going to talk about circuit courts. We're going to talk about federal district courts. Those are all created by Congress. The Constitution created one court, and that was the Supreme Court of the United States. The other thing is in the Constitution, they identify something that they call the original jurisdiction of the court. That's a fancy word or phrase, but the original jurisdiction of the court are the cases that the framers said these kind of cases have to be heard in the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court only. So for example, if a state sues another state, the framers said that has to be settled in the Supreme Court. If an ambassador to a country is being sued, that has to happen in the Supreme Court. So there are a number of other cases. You don't need to memorize that. We'll go over this when we talk about the judiciary, but I'm telling you right now that I'm not going to test you on the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. I'm actually going to talk about the kind of cases the court tends to listen to and hear, and I'm more likely to test you on that. So with that in mind, that's all I want to say about the judicial branch, and the remainder of this is going to be sort of a personal comment. You can stop. None of what I'm going to say that follows is going to be on the exam, and so you can stop. If you're not interested, then you can stop. No harm, no foul. I'm not going to be bothered by anybody. I won't even know, but I'm not going to be bothered by somebody deciding, hey, I don't got time for this. I've got a bunch of things I got to do. I'm moving on to things that are going to be on the exam. For those of you who decided to hang around and hear my thoughts, I appreciate it. I really do. You're going to see me sort of referring back to my notes, and so I thought about this very carefully and wanted to choose my words very carefully as well. So once again, thank you. The vast majority of my teachers from kindergarten through high school were white. I didn't think anything of it. It was reflective of my neighborhood. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley during a time when it was predominantly white. As I reflect on it now, the version of American history that I learned came from a very white perspective. Like while I learned about slavery, it was always a subplot, not a central theme in American history. The central theme revolved around the ideals expressed in the Declaration of Independence and the extent to which the United States over time was becoming a more perfect union, the extent to which it was living up to those ideals. But in recent years, there's been a movement among scholars to revisit the way we think and talk about American history, and placing slavery, and in particular the enslavement of human beings, as you're going to hear me refer to it, as a central theme in American history. I'm persuaded by this research, and I want to tell you why. The research has made it abundantly clear that the economic rise of the United States in its early years was attributable in large part to the fact that the southern states used forced labor to pick cotton, tobacco, eventually sugar. And then when the cotton gin was discovered or invented, which made it possible to pick even more cotton much faster, additional land was needed to grow the cotton, and so Native Americans were forced off their land so that more cotton could be grown. Simply put, the economic rise of the United States was only possible because the laws permitted the enslavement of human beings, men, women, and children, for which there was no escape. What this research also makes clear is that the southern states were not the only ones who benefited from the enslavement of human beings. Northern states profited as well. The factories in the north were the ones that processed the cotton that was picked by enslaved human beings, sold them abroad, and made incredible profits. Banks, financial institutions in the north also benefited from the enslavement of human beings. In fact, banks made loans that helped enslavers purchase more slaves by using their current slaves as collateral. There's no way around it. If we're going to look honestly at the history of the United States, the economic success that turned the United States from an agrarian economy into an economic, industrialized superpower came at the expense of human beings that were enslaved, as well as people who were forced off their lands in what some call a genocide. This is the history of the United States. Our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, made a bold statement. For those of you who've grown up in the United States, you've heard these words many times, and I'm going to quote them. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Especially at the early stages of American history, the country completely failed to live up to those ideals. Now that I'm updating my lectures after 8 years, I'm going to highlight some of the issues that I didn't talk about in previous videos. Some of you might feel like I'm giving too much emphasis to these kinds of issues. Some of you may feel like I'm not giving enough emphasis to these issues. I'm actually really interested in what you think. And so if you have feelings about this, post them on the current events discussion board, and I'll be happy to engage in a civil, thoughtful conversation about complicated issues. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about something called the 3/5 Compromise, a part of the Constitution. What I'm going to be talking about in the first part is the extent to which the 3/5 Compromise ensured that slavery was going to continue in the early stages of the Republic. But I'm also going to talk about like a widely shared misunderstanding of the meaning of the 3/5 Compromise. And when I do, some people are probably going to get pissed off. It's not my intention to piss people off. It's just my intention to sort of share what I know and understand about American history and about our Constitution, and then talk about it. So once again, I'll be talking about the 3/5 Compromise in the next video, and hopefully you'll find something interesting in it. But thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me talk about this stuff. I really appreciate your interest. Thank you. So with that in mind, hang on one sec.